I guess I'm going to introduce our speaker. Now, I got to give you a little bit of background. Oh, before I do that, I want to recognize our sound and video man, Matt Young and Bill Bragg. Stand up. Have they not done a good job? So, for those of you who I haven't told this to, our speaker, Patrick McLaughlin, he and I went to high school together. That's true. And we played on the same football team, which was a darn good team at Lakewood High. It was a very good team. He was a defensive tackle and a tight end, and I was a messenger guard. We had a great team, and I'll tell you about Pat. He's a tall, lanky guy. And in high school, he was a tall, lanky guy with an easy smile. Everybody liked Pat because he just had an easy smile, still does. But he's the only football player that broke the steel beams on our sled. You know, we hit the sled, and he broke the sled. And we had a coach who was kind of he was a tough guy named Laspina. He took him out to supper, gave him a supper for breaking that sled. But how I got Pat here, Pat and I, believe me, our lives have paralleled each other throughout, but we really haven't been connecting with each other. But we're having our, I guess it's the 60th high school reunion, and in doing that, I discovered that Pat I knew he was in Vietnam, I knew he was a decorated soldier, but I didn't know he wrote a book, and he wrote this book called Cheerful Obedience, which I do want to ask him about where he got that name. So I called him up. There's my speaker. You know, you got to look for these speakers. So I called Pat up and I said, Pat, I see you wrote a book. Congratulations. And I know that you fought for freedom. And he says, yes, I fought for freedom. And I said, I know how much you respect freedom and being free. And he says, yes. I says, good, because you're going to come to Ashland and give us a free speech. There was silence on the other end. But you know what? When I ask him, he can't refuse, you know. And he wouldn't refuse, okay? And I'm proud. You know what? I'm proud to say that I know him. I'm proud to introduce him tonight. I'm proud that he went to the same school I did. He's a man of real accomplishment. I don't normally read things, I just talk, but I'm going to read the accomplishments of this man. Pat is a former United States attorney for the Northern District of Ohio, having been appointed by President Ronald Reagan. He worked up in Cleveland as the Northern District prosecutor. He was the head man, and he was there for 10 years. He then retired. He has been appointed by the Supreme Court, and he still has a law practice, but he's been appointed by the Supreme Court to serve on this Professional Conduct and Behavior Board. So I have to be very, very careful. And I don't want him to know any stories about me that he can take back to the Supreme Court. But at any rate, listen, he was at Lakewood High School, and he graduated, and he went to Ohio University. And he was there for a year or two. And then he quit Ohio University, and he volunteered for the draft. He wanted to join the Army. Like many of us at that age and that time of life, this is what American boys do. When our country calls, we go. And that's just the way it was. And that's how we were raised. And that's how he was raised. And he's an Air Force brat, aren't you, Pat? And so he knew what he was getting into. A lot of us didn't know what we were getting into, but he did. And he was sent to Vietnam, where he was served with the 1st Infantry Division. And he's what many of you recognize when I say he was a grunt. That means an infantry soldier. That means the guys that do the heavy lifting. That means the guys that are facing the enemy on a very close basis. And he performed outstandingly in that regard. His leadership skills were recognized. Became a squad leader, I believe a platoon leader. Not only that, but, you know, when I tell you the medals that he was awarded, starting with the Silver Star, that tells a lot. And the people in this room know what that means. He got the Bronze Star. He was awarded the Purple Heart. He won the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry and the Vietnamese Bronze Star and Silver Star. His commander called him I believe called him the best soldier he had ever had. And Pat was known for walking point, which, again, we could talk about all of the accolades about being an attorney and being on a Supreme Court, being appointed and all that business. But when you tell a man that man walked point and walked it a lot, and he was awarded those awards, that's the true nature of that man, in my judgment. When he got out of the Army, he served in 1967 and 68, which was really a hot time in Vietnam. That was when large numbers of troops, you all know that. He served with the Big Red One, the Dogface battalion, I guess it was the 1st Battalion. They saw heavy action, and when he came home, he didn't forget the veterans. His service didn't end with Vietnam. He spent 2 years in Washington, D.C., running an organization to improve the services of the VA, to make the VA more responsive to veterans, to Vietnam veterans. He was fighting for you in Washington, D.C. Then he went to law school up in Cleveland, and he was in the Army Reserve. I believe he rose to the rank of major. Am I right there, Pat? And so he kept serving his country, and then Ronald Reagan tapped him to be the district attorney for the Northern District of Ohio, where he served for 10 years, and then he went into his private practice, and now he's with the Supreme Court watching us attorneys, making sure we're all right, So it's with a great deal of pride, and I do mean pride, that I introduce to you my friend, Patrick McLaughlin. He's kicking me out already.
Yeah, no. You keep your schedule.
Yeah.
My cup runneth over. To be in a room with Vietnam veterans and their families, their loved ones, is for me as good as it gets. Because we share a brotherhood. You don't know me, and I don't know you, but I do know you, and you know me, because we were there. We were there when our country sent us to Vietnam. And we served as well as any group of American servicemen in the history of this country. And I'm proud to be a Vietnam veteran.
Get closer to the mic.
I'm proud to be a Vietnam veteran. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about that. And to be introduced by a high school classmate, Bob DeSanto, who you know well. And we did play football for Lakewood back when Lakewood was actually winning football games. And Bob DeSanto, number 62, pound for pound, was the toughest guy on the field. True story, absolutely. You may have seen recently that the superintendent of West Point announced a major change in West Point's mission statement governing the Corps of Cadets. The Academy's motto, duty, honor, country, was removed from the mission statement and replaced by the words Army values. The optics on this in today's national environment, including the fact that the Army has failed to meet its recruiting targets, are both tone deaf and self-defeating. To replace duty, honor, country with Army values is unworthy. The concept of Army values, which I in no way seek to diminish, is subject to change with each new group of leadership, military and civilian. It's transitory in nature. And what the Army values were in July 1966 when I stepped foot on Fort Benning changed over the decades. And I suspect that in the decades to come, Army values may change some more. But the words duty, honor, country, and that for which they stand are the words that we understand as veterans that have paid our dues, and I think the words that those who will serve after us understand. But after learning of the Army's decision, I found a quiet place, and I listened to the audio of General Douglas MacArthur's speech to the Corps of Cadets on May the 12th of 1962. Some of us were in high school when MacArthur spoke to those cadets, and neither we, those cadets, or the superintendent of West Point had any idea what we would be facing in a few years. Let me read you some of the eloquence displayed by one of America's greatest military leaders on that day in May 1962. Before him sat the 4,000-member Corps of Cadets at West Point and its superintendent, a two-star named William Westmoreland. And I quote the following excerpts from MacArthur's speech. Duty, honor, country. Those three hollowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, and what you will be. They are your rallying points to build courage when courage seems to fail, to regain faith when there seems to be little cause for faith, to create hope when hope becomes forlorn. And what sort of soldiers are those you will lead? Are they reliable? Are they brave? Are they capable of victory? Their story is known to all of you. It is the story of the American man at arms. My estimate of him was forged on the battlefields many, many years ago and has never changed. I regarded him then as I regard him now, as one of the world's noblest figures, not only as one of the finest military characters, but also as one of the most stainless. He needs no eulogy from me or from any other man. He has written his own history and written it in red on his enemy's breast. I do not know the dignity of their birth, but I know the glory of their death, always for them, duty, honor, country. Yours is the profession of arms, the will to win, the sure knowledge that in war there is no substitute for victory, that if you lose, the nation will be destroyed, that the very obsession of your public service must be duty, honor, country. In my dreams, oh no, one of the great lines from MacArthur's speech, the long gray line has never failed us. Were you to do so, a million ghosts in olive drab, in brown khaki, in blue and gray, would rise from their white crosses, thundering these magic words: duty, honor, country. In my dreams, I hear again the crash of guns, the rattle of musketry, the strange, mournful mutter of the battlefield. But in the evening of my memory, I come back to West Point. Always there echoes and re-echoes the words duty, honor, country. End of quotes. I urge every military leader, regardless of branch, to find a quiet place and listen to and reflect upon the words of General Douglas MacArthur, delivering eloquent words of wisdom to men that would soon be serving in a strange named land halfway around the globe. The General's message is timeless. Let us revisit together what I call the gauntlet of the 60s. The gauntlet of the 60s. Take a walk down memory lane with me. With little notice, the nation's commitment of military advisors to South Vietnam reached 12,000 by 1962. By year end, we had lost 53 men in that unknown country, South Vietnam. Where is that on the globe? We remember the November 1963 tragedy that shook America and the world when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. My senior year of high school. By the end of 1963, America had lost 122 men in Vietnam, but I don't recall focusing on that at all at that time. In the summer of 1964, I registered for selective service and needing funds to go to college, took a job as a deckhand on an ore freighter plowing the Great Lakes. Although we did not understand it at the time, August 5, 1964 was a seminal date for the warriors called upon to fight the Vietnam War. President Lyndon Johnson spoke to the nation announcing, quote, further deliberate attacks against U.S. naval vessels, close quote, while urging that Congress pass a joint resolution. 2 days later, Congress passed the Tonkin Gulf Resolution. August 5, 1964 may not be a date which will live in infamy, but it initiated 9 years of warfare in South Vietnam for the United States, and 2 more years, 11 in all, before we unceremoniously departed that war-torn nation on April 30th of 1975. By the end of 1964, America had lost 216 more men in Vietnam. This was hardly mentioned on the nightly news and of little real concern except among the families of those in harm's way. In the winter and spring of 1965, I attended night classes at Tri-C, Cuyahoga Community College. I worked days, and my classification changed from 1A to 2S, and most of you know what that means, but for those who don't recall, 1A back in those days meant immediately draftable. 2S was a deferment from the draft because you were a student taking at least 12 credit hours in college. So back on the ore boats for me in the summer of 1965, and I know that I did not pay any attention to any obscure news reports that the 1st Battalion, 18th Infantry had landed on the beach of Cameron Bay on July 12th of 1965. Why would I? And who the hell are the 18th Infantry? I continued taking night classes and worked as an orderly in the emergency room at Lakewood Hospital. In 1965, 1,928 men died in the Vietnam War. By 1966, I was very much aware that a war was going on, and it was my time to pay dues. As my father had done before me, the McLaughlins of Patton, Pennsylvania had 5 blue stars in their window during World War II, the big one. Dad flew P-38s in the South Pacific and then bombers out of the Aleutians. My Aunt Marty was an Army nurse on New Guinea. My Uncle Joe was a tanker with Patton's Third Army, and Uncles Bob and George were on Navy destroyers, one in the Atlantic and one in the Pacific. And they all made it home. But so as I'm looking at military service, rather than enlist for 3 or 4 years, I decided to volunteer for the draft, which meant, as you know, 2 years of active duty. That way I could serve my country during wartime, get out, hopefully, and return to college with the GI Bill to assist financially. I walked into the draft board, and they changed my status from 2S to 1A, and Uncle Sam sent me the "I need you boy" letter, which some of you may have received, ordering me to report for an induction physical on March the 8th of 1966. On the evening of March 7th, friends hosted a going-away party for me in a bar. Alcohol flowed and things got sideways. There were some fights. I was arrested and charged with assault and battery, a first-degree misdemeanor. I showed up for my induction physical just several hours after my dad had bailed me out of jail. I suffered through the indignities of it all, and when they learned that there was a charge pending, they told me, "Get out of here, go home." So to make a long story short, I went to trial on what to me was a clear case of self-defense and waived a jury on advice of my lawyer. The Munich Court judge found me guilty. After serving my sentence, I learned that I was no longer eligible for military service. This was distressing to me and most unacceptable, because it was my duty to serve, and I had to find a way to change that. So I went down to see an Army recruiter. He wasn't very optimistic, but he said that I could apply for a waiver. And I asked him to gather all the paperwork I needed. I filled it all out, got my court file, prepared an affidavit, which sort of gave my view of how I saw it, at least, and sent it into 3rd Army headquarters and waited. Well, I have no proof. I believe something like this took place at headquarters. An Army sergeant was reviewing my file, requesting a waiver. He takes it into a captain. He says, "Sir, you ought to see this application for a waiver." The captain reviews the file, looks at the sergeant, and says, "What's your recommendation?" The sergeant said, "Captain, I think that this guy has 11 Bravo written all over him." The smiling captain says, "I agree. Application for waiver approved." So for those of you that don't know the terminology 11 Bravo, that's what the Army says, calls us guys that were light weapons infantry. And sure enough, that sergeant was right. And so my name goes back in the 1A draft pool, placed at the top, and I got my second letter from Uncle Sam. Report to the induction center on July 22nd, 1966. No party for me this time. I stayed home that night. And not being a complete dummy, I stayed home that night. Since there was an airline strike, the Army put us on a bus to Fort Benning. I arrived on my birthday, July 23rd. I can assure you that the drill sergeants did not have a birthday cake waiting for me on my arrival. Basic at Fort Benning, infantry AIT at Fort Gordon, Georgia. Home for leave, and on December 31, 1966, I left Lakewood, Ohio for Vietnam. By midnight, that year's war dead count totaled 6,350. 1967 was my year in Vietnam. When I arrived, they made me a PFC. When I left, I was a staff sergeant. I was offered but declined a battlefield commission to second lieutenant. I served with Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 18th Infantry, 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, also known as Dogface Charlie. Dogface was the battalion call sign, and our battalion commander was Lieutenant Colonel Dick Cavazos, an Army legend that would go on to earn 4 stars. Fort Hood, Texas is now named Fort Cavazos. The best way to appreciate how my year went is to read Cheer for Obedience, my debut fiction novel. That's right, a guy at the age of 77 decides to publish his first fiction novel. It happens. It's a work of fiction based on real events, and you all have bookmarks at your table, and I hope you take it, and I hope you can use it. My website is on the bookmark, and you ought to check it out. Maybe during the Q&A, there might be some more questions about the book, but I'll tell you now that for years I've thought and talked about writing a book about Vietnam. I wanted to write a book that was authentic to the war and to the men that fought the war. Cheer for Obedience is not Hollywood's Vietnam War. So by the end of 1967, the U.S. body count increased by another 11,363 patriots. More troops were headed to Vietnam, but I was coming home. America in 1968 was different than America in 1966. I had been changed forever by my experience in the war, and America had changed forever. Following leave, I reported to Fort Huachuca, Arizona for my last 5 months or so in the Big Green Machine. I was a platoon sergeant, a drill instructor really for an AIT training unit. Out of the Army in the summer of 1968, I met an OSU co-ed who, as a return out, helped me get my head straight and focused on college. 55 years later, she's still messing around with my head. But not a day went by when I didn't think about the guys I left behind, the men I served with in Vietnam. I had 1 foot back in Nam and 1 foot here at home. The year 1968 proved to be America's bloodiest of the war. We lost another 16,899 men in Vietnam. 1969, and I'm on my way to Ohio University to get a college degree. But I also had law school on my radar screen. And this is from a guy who's the first guy in his family to go to college. I didn't know any lawyers, I didn't know any judges. But the experience I labored through when I was charged, tried, and sentenced persuaded me that if the defense attorney, the prosecutor, and the judge could be lawyers, then I damn sure could be a lawyer. And I'll tell you that had I not gone through that experience, I would not be a lawyer today. The summer of 1969 saw me back on the Great Lakes, this time on a self-unloader, and I watched Neil Armstrong walk on the moon from a VFW in Marblehead. My bride-to-be was off on a tour of Europe for college credit, no doubt sent by her father to keep her away from me. By 1969, college students across the nation became more anti-Vietnam War. more anti-military service, more anti-soldier. Destruction and violence followed. All across America, people failed to separate the war from the warrior. Many of us returning got a harsh dose of reality. It was not a shining moment for America. As the decade of the 60s struck midnight, America had lost 11,780 men in Vietnam in 1969. As the new decade began its long journey, I was looking more and more to the future and not the past. After 5 years of service in Vietnam, the 1st Infantry Division came home in April 1970. The Big Red One suffered 20,770 soldiers killed or wounded. In action, nearly the same number that the division experienced in World War II. Nearly the same number that the division experienced in World War II. That's right, the same division that fought Rommel in North Africa, that landed at Sicily and fought through the Sicily campaign with Terry Allen and George Patton, led the assault on Omaha Beach on D-Day, fought through France, Germany, and into Czechoslovakia, some of the toughest fighting in Europe. Vietnam wasn't a conflict. Vietnam was a war. Christine and I married in August of 1970. We bought a used 60 by 12 trailer where we spent our first 2 years as I finished up at OU. Life seemed simpler then. I became active in the Vietnam Veterans Movement and decided to defer law school for a year to go to Washington in order to be executive director of the National Association of Concerned Veterans, where we lobbied Congress and the administration for better benefits in health care for guys and women coming back from Vietnam. First year of law school, not done with military service, I went down to see a recruiter and I decided to enlist because they would let me go to a JAG unit. So I joined the Army Reserves, received a commission of first lieutenant in 1979, and I participated in the active reserves for 14 years and concluded my military service in 1988 at the rank of major, the same year that I concluded my time as the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio. I am the long-serving president of the Greater Cleveland Veterans Memorial, www.clevelandvetsmemorial.org. The memorial in downtown Cleveland is recognized by Marshall Frederick's majestic statue, the fountain of eternal life, symbolizing mankind rising from the ashes of war. And on plaques surrounding the fountain are the names of 5,552 Cuyahoga County war dead from 1899 to 2014, our last date of casualty. Originally dedicated in 1964, the memorial had the names of World War II and Korean War dead from Cuyahoga County around it. But in 2004, I rededicated the memorial and rededicated it again in 2014 as we added names from the Spanish-American War, World War I, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. We also added 125 names of World War II and Korean War veterans that had been missed when they originally dedicated the memorial in 1964. The Vietnam War is represented by 424 patriots on that memorial. Let me conclude by telling you again, I'm proud of my military service in Vietnam. I went where the country sent me and did the best I knew how. Hell, we all did. And truth is, the men and women that served in uniform during the Vietnam War are the best of their generation. We served when it was our time to make America free. America's lucky to have us. I applaud all veterans, and today's military and veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan are the best of their generation, and we owe those young soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and Coast Guardmen all the love and affection we can give them, because they're paying some heavy dues. And a special thanks to the families of those that served and are serving today. The love and support of our families and loved ones is what makes it all work. And thanks again to all of you for keeping the memories alive and never forgetting the names of those that did not come home. Welcome home, and thank you.
I gotta move this down a little bit, so. All right, don't be laughing. All right, I know you have some questions, and one of the people back there had a question, and there's a fella back there that just got back from Vietnam. Have you ever been to Vietnam? I know you were there one time. All right, tell us about the second time.
All right, thanks, Bob. So, again, I make a long story short. But so, my wife is Greek, and so for our 25th wedding anniversary, I took her to Greece. And so the first time we went there, both of her grandparents on both sides came from the old country. So 10 years later, for our 35th, I went home and I said, well, you remember when I took you to Greece 10 years ago? Yeah, I do. I'm going to take you somewhere special this year for our 35th. She goes, all excited. Where are we going? So we're going to Vietnam. Oh, hello. So let me just say the jury was out. She went with me. We went together, and we had a lovely time. You know what? I didn't go back to any of the places I served in. We checked into the Rex Hotel, which I had only read about in novels. You know, where the brass and the muckety muck stayed there, not guys like me, some of you. And so we went to the rooftop terrace bar at the Rex. The first night we got there, I wanted to have a drink. Balmy Saigon night. Saigon. I don't do Ho Chi Minh City. And so over on my right is this massive flag, red flag with the star. It was the flag of my enemy when I was there. And I'm looking at that, and over here on the left is a tall building. And I look, and there are a neon advertisement sign on that building covering several floors, and it read, Ford Motor Company. And I said, there it is. There it is. This is 2005 that we went back. We traveled the country. The people treated us very well. Actually, they were lovely. My wife was won over by how kind they were. I experienced no animosity, even after they learned that I had been there before 1975, which is sort of the code word. So if you were there before 1975, that meant you were an Army, Marine, Navy, Airman. You were there during the war. And still, everything was fine. So I recommend it. Lovely country to travel in, and frankly, they see us as allies, especially since they're having such trouble with China, as many other countries are. So it was great. I went back, and glad that I did. Needed to see it again.
Any questions?
How much has it changed? Well, the question was, how much has it changed?
You're not on.
How much did it change is the question. Well, I mean, obviously, from walking point and going out on ambush patrols, it changed a lot. And getting mortared, I didn't get mortared this time, and that was helpful. It's a young country. I mean, the vast majority of people weren't even born when we were there. And they're energetic, and they're keen on having close relationships with the United States. I know this from some of the conversations I had when I was over there. So, yeah, it's changed a lot, but I would say it's changed for the better.
You're on television now from Vietnam.
Pardon me?
You're on television now from Vietnam.
I'm on television?
No. On television,
Oh,
Vietnamese people have Texas and another state, Colorado. Now you can get it in your house.
oh,
The music is from Saigon, and you know.
well, this gentleman says that you can actually now get television from Vietnam.
Yes.
And you can get it, apparently through cable of some kind. I have not seen that, but I recommend the food. The Vietnamese restaurants are great. And we have in Cleveland a big Vietnamese community, and I know a lot of them, and they're lovely people. And many of them, let me say this, many of them were our allies. They were not our enemies, and some of them spent time in these indoctrination camps after the North Vietnamese took over. They were in prison for a number of years before they could escape South Vietnam.
Any other questions? Okay.
Bob, thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. Really been a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you, Pat. I'm scheduled for some closing remarks. I didn't know I was going to be the MC, but I'm scheduled for some closing remarks. So I thought about what to say, and I wanted to talk about the importance of what Pat's life has been and the importance of that book. The Vietnam veterans in this room are the most defined veteran in American history. We have been defined many ways by other people. We have been defined by Hollywood. We have been defined by the TV programs. We have been defined by politicians. We have been defined by everybody but really ourselves. And how they defined us, and Pat talked about it, they defined us when we were there as psychopaths. They defined us when we came home as violent people, dumb people, just terrible ways they defined us. They didn't even define us as patriots. Many of our veterans came home, put their uniforms away, and didn't want to, were afraid or ashamed to wear them. Then that changed. Then they came up with a cartoon character, a Rambo. Then they presented us as defined us as Rambo, a sullen, brooding Vietnam veteran that was going to even the score. That's who we were defined as. None of it was true. And what I like and what the importance of Pat McLaughlin's life is this. He lived the life of the American veteran in serving. He distinguished himself in the battlefield. That's how he defined himself. That's how he defined an American fighting man. When he came home, he defined the American veteran as a person who went back and took care of the veterans that were left behind, and he served his community. He came home like all of us did. Just look around. The people that are here are the people that serve their community. And finally, at this point in time, we are now defined again, and I'm not sure what that definition is. But the importance, what Pat's doing, and the importance of his book, is he's setting the record straight. That book is defining who we really are, who we really were. And there's going to be fewer and fewer of us to make that definition. And so when I look at Pat McLaughlin, I say the man's life the way he conducted himself in the Army, the way he conducted himself in the community, and now he's setting the record straight. Thank you, Pat. Appreciate it. And we want to give you a few gifts. There's a fellow here. Come on up. Come on up here. You're going to get a gift. This is a gift handmade by a man who has paid a heavy price with his sons, and it is handmade, hand painted. Give me that.
Thank you so much. What a great gift.
The other thing, Pat, that we want to give you, I mentioned it earlier, is the painting that hangs in the at the Ashland County Historical Society is the painting by Robert Halliday, Marine Combat veteran. Many of us, when we saw it, thought it might be the greatest painting that came out of the Vietnam War, and a lot of us believe that. This painting, we think, it brings us almost to tears. And there's very few copies. You may have only the second copy that you have. We want you to have that. And that was Robert Halliday. And to me, there's a story in that picture that thank you, Pat.
Thank you so much. It's tugging at my heart.
Good. You deserve it, Pat. All right, now we have a special way to end this program. I think I've covered everything. But Melanie Miller, would you come up here, please? Pat, this is our state representative. We love her, okay? And she's all American. She's like the girls we went to high school with, okay?
Well, wait a minute.
Well, we dreamed about. Let me put it like that, okay? Can we do that? She is a very talented person, and she loves the country. She loves the city. She loves the state of Ohio. And she's a very talented musician. And she loves America, yes. And she is going to sing a very special version of God Bless America. This is the original version, and she'll tell you a little bit about the original version. Many of you haven't heard it before. You're going to hear it tonight, and we can all join. This is a time for all of us to really join with Melanie.
Well, I appreciate that introduction. Many of you asked me tonight what branch of the military I served in because of my jacket here tonight. But I thought it was fitting. I thought it looked like a military jacket, and it was another way of me showing how much that we love and support and appreciate each and every one of you for giving of yourself so that we could live free here in this country. So thank you for what you have done. I am going to end, this is sort of tradition here at this banquet, is to close the program with a prayer, which is God Bless America. And I am actually going to sing the beginning verse of God Bless America, which we usually don't sing, but I would like to start with that per request of Mr. Bob DeSanto. And then if you would please stand and join me in singing the chorus. We'll do that 2 times through, but I'll do it a cappella, the verse, and you can close your eyes and listen to that if you'd like. All right, here we go. Where the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us pledge allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful to a land so fair as we lift our voices in a solemn prayer. Would you join me? God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Last time. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Amen.
All right, before you go here, there's two announcements. We have a little, okay. We've got a little booklet on veterans benefits. It tells you all about the benefits you can get. Ann Schar's holding it up. You can get it when you leave at the back table. That's, I think, compliments of our state representative brought that to us. So thank you, Melanie, on that. And then the other is that the books are still available. It's a good read. I started reading mine last night, and I didn't want to put it down. So, and Pat will welcome you if you want to have any questions or want to talk to him. I'm sure he'll be glad to talk to you. Now, come on up. All right. There's 50. I hope I got that right. Just keep in your prayers and your minds that in the Vietnam War there's still 1,577 soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen missing, and this year they recovered 4 more. So the one thing the government's doing is they're trying to find our soldiers. So very good. See you all next year. Enjoy yourself.